Welcome back. We start with UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres, who has expressed concern over the use of force in protests against the controversial citizenship law in India. Speaking to reporters in New York, UN spokesperson Stéphane Dujarric said Secretary General pressed India to respect freedom of expression and peaceful assembly. Last week, the United Nations called India's new citizenship law fundamentally discriminatory. Meanwhile, mass protests continue across India against the controversial law. The government has banned public gatherings in northeast Delhi. The section is imposed after clashes between student protesters and police in Salimpur area of Indian capital. 6 people have been killed in protests since last week, as thousands have been arrested by police. The Indian Supreme Court has issued a notice to the government seeking clarification over the controversial citizenship law. The court is hearing 60 petitions against the law filed by activist Harsh Mandar, historian Irfan Habib, economist Prabhat Patanik, and others. During a hearing, the court issued notice to central government and asked it to publish the act for public to read. The court adjourned the hearing till next week. In the pleas, petitioners have argued granting citizenship on religious basis goes against the grain of Indian constitution. The petitioners asked the top court to declare the new law as unconstitutional. There have been widespread protests across the country since the new law came into effect. Pakistan's minority Hindu community has rejected India's offer to grant them citizenship under a new law. New Delhi's controversial act offers citizenship to minorities from neighboring countries. Hindu Council said Pakistan's Hindu community unanimously rejects this bill, which is dividing India on communal lines. It said a true Hindu will never support this legislation. Pakistan's Sikh and Christian communities have also strongly rejected the bill, terming it against basic human rights. In occupied Kashmir, Indian forces killed 3 Kashmiris during a military operation in Rajouri district. Kashmir has been under a curfew and communications blackout since India stripped the region of its autonomy on the 5th of August. Internet services remain suspended in the area to curb protests, so it's unclear how many people have been killed by Indian forces. The United Nations Security Council is scheduled to meet today in New York to discuss the situation in Kashmir. The U.S. Senate has approved a defense bill of $738 billion. The bill includes policy measures to sanction troops and others who committed war crimes in Syria. President Donald Trump has promised to immediately sign the Senate-approved bill into law. The bill creates a Space Force, the first new branch of the U.S. military in more than 60 years. The legislation calls for mandatory sanctions on the Nord Stream 2 and Turk Stream gas pipelines between Russia and Europe. The bill also sanctions Turkey over its acquisition of a Russian defense system and prohibits the transfer of F-35 jets to Ankara. The bill defies any restrictions on the U.S. president from waging war against Iran and the deployment of low-yield nuclear weapons. This is the most expensive set of military measures in the nation's history. In Syria, airstrikes by government forces have killed 24 people in Idlib. The Syrian Civil Defense says 22 people were wounded in the attacks. It said women and children are among the dead. Idlib is the last major stronghold of rebels who have been fighting government forces since 2015. The war in Syria has killed over 370,000 people and displaced millions of others since 2011. The U.S. has extended its support to Bolivia's interim president, Jeanine Áñez. President Donald Trump said Áñez is working to ensure a peaceful democratic transition through free elections. In a Twitter post, Trump denounced the ongoing violence in Bolivia, both from inside and outside the country. Meanwhile, former President Evo Morales said even though he will not be a candidate, he has a right to remain politically active. He named his former economy minister, Luis Arce Catacora, and a former union boss, Andronico Rodriguez, as his party's potential presidential candidates. In Panama, 12 inmates have been killed and 13 others wounded in a gun battle inside a prison near the capital city. Police say the shootings occurred in a cell block of inmates from a single local gang. They said several guns were seized after the skirmish. President Laurentino Cortizo said the incident suggested jail guards helped smuggle in the weapons. In the United States, Donald Trump's administration has rejected a Senate resolution recognizing the killing of Armenians by Ottoman Turks as genocide. State Department spokesperson Morgan Ortagus says the government's position over the matter has not changed. This comes after Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan threatened to recognize the killing of Native Americans in retaliation. Armenia says 1.5 million people were killed in an effort to wipe out the ethnic group in 1915. At least 19 people have been injured as protesters clash with police in Ukraine's capital, Kiev. Thousands took part in demonstrations outside parliament against controversial plan to allow the sale of farmland. The demonstrators denounced a bill going through parliament which would allow the sale of farmland from October 2020. Protesters, including farmers and nationalists, threw stones and bricks at the police, who retaliated with tear gas. A group of protesters set up 2 large tents outside Parliament, but police tore them down and repelled the demonstrators. Opinion polls show between half and 2/3 of Ukrainians oppose this initiative. The UN says an average of 9 children have been killed or maimed every day in Afghanistan in the year 2019. In a report, the global body said in 9 months, over 600 children were killed and over 1,800 injured. The report said data shows an 11% increase in the killings as compared to last year. It said this situation is largely due to a surge in suicide bomb attacks and clashes between Taliban and Afghan forces. The UN body said even by Afghanistan's grim standards, 2019 has been particularly deadly for children. We have a lot more coming up right after this short break, so stay tuned. Welcome back. It's been a year since the Sudanese started protesting for the removal of former dictator Omar al-Bashir. The ex-president was found guilty on corruption charges and sentenced to 2 years in detention. Sudan is now looking for a new start, but its economy is still in recession because of US sanctions. Details in this report.
Sara Al-Fateh runs a cooking oil factory in Khartoum. She spends most of her day at a factory and has a crew of dedicated workers. But she's struggling to keep the business running because she cannot order replacement parts for her machines. Al-Fateh blames American sanctions for the problem.
We can't make further investments on spare parts because we cannot open a bank account without a letter of credit because of the American sanctions.
Washington imposed a trade embargo on Sudan in 1997 over the state's alleged links to Al-Qaeda. The curbs affected Khartoum's access to international banking networks, as well as trade in technology and spare parts. The sanctions were eventually lifted in 2017, but the country is still on Washington's state sponsors of terrorism blacklist.
Absolutely no transfers are made from a bank inside Sudan to a country outside Sudan in a convertible currency, whether in dollars, sterling, euros, dirhams, or the Saudi riyal. Nothing. There is never any transfer done through the banking system.
In today's post-Bashir Sudan, inflation is hitting 60% and the country's foreign reserves are empty. The country's civilian-appointed Prime Minister Abdullah Hamdok visited Washington, D.C. in December and asked for Sudan to be removed from the blacklist. But this won't happen until the U.S. is assured Bashir's regime is dismantled. As such, post-Bashir Sudan is off to a rough start.
In France, transport and public services remain disrupted as strikes against government pension reforms entered their 14th day. Hundreds of thousands of protesters took to the streets across the country. This report has all the details.
From Eiffel Tower operators to doctors, the strikes have drawn French workers from all sectors of the economy. Protesters are demanding the government take back its pension reforms that ask them to retire later or face reduced payouts. But the government says it won't back down from its plan. Speaking in Parliament, Prime Minister Edouard Philippe said the reforms will be turned into a bill by January 2020.
We've clearly stated what our project is, and on this project, on the creation of a universal pension system, my determination, that of the government and that of the entire majority, is total. I am saying this clearly, total.
Police fired tear gas to disperse the protesters in central Paris, but demonstrators are determined to continue the strike until their demands are met. Even pension chief Jean-Paul Delavoye's resignation could not calm their anger.
If we accept a Christmas break, then we're stopping the strike. If we don't strike, then Macron is passing his reform, since he said he's passing it in January. So, we have to stop him. We have to be logical. People didn't strike for about 15 days just to stop and say, no, let's go see Santa Claus.
French trade unions have called for a major push before the holidays, urging workers across all sectors to go on strike and join the countrywide protests.
Australia has recorded its hottest day as the national average temperature hit a record high of 40.9 degrees Celsius. The new record may not last long because forecasters are predicting a more intense heat wave later in the week. The Bureau of Meteorology said the previous record of 40.3 degrees Celsius set in January 2013 fell on Tuesday. The reason for the baking temperature is a positive Indian Ocean dipole, where the sea surface is warmer in the western half and cooler in the eastern ocean. The record comes as the nation battles a severe drought and bushfire crisis. Prime Minister Scott Morrison's government has been criticized for its response to the fires and its climate policies. In the US, lovers of the unusual can take a look at the country's largest ice maze. To be found in the center of Washington, D.C., the huge labyrinth is made of pure, clear ice. See more of the Winter Wonderland in this report.
Washington, D.C.'s city center is the place to find an ice-cold thrill for the eyes, the largest ice maze in the United States. It's an immersive exhibit built with 7-foot-high ice walls made of nearly 57,000 kilos of crystal clear frozen water. The 300 ice blocks are lit up with bright lights to complete the sense of being lost in a frozen labyrinth.
It was kind of cold, kind of warm in there. For a cold day, it's good to be inside. And it was pretty much easy for us, but we got to some dead ends, but we made it through.
Though the winter weather forecast predicts 2 days of rain, organizers say the maze, which is under a tent, can withstand all kinds of weather, except perhaps a tornado.
No, me neither. It's totally unique. I think it's really cool. DC has been putting new things like the botanical garden. I think that's something new. I haven't seen it before. And then now the ice maze. I think it's really cool that there's more things to do in the city. Yeah.
Visiting the maze is free, although guests can donate to the Children's National Hospital through the Find Your Joy campaign. It will remain open to the public until tomorrow.
Norway is one of only a few countries in Europe with higher greenhouse gas emissions now than in 1990. As the world tries to slow global warming, a huge oil field is breathing new life into Norway's oil sector. More in this report.
Beneath these North Sea platforms lie dozens of billions of dollars worth of oil. The Johan Sverdrup field, run by Norwegian producer Equinor, pumps around 350,000 barrels of oil per day. Already the highest producing oil field in Western Europe, the company aims to almost double its daily production by 2023. While alarm over climate change and calls to curb fossil fuel production are mounting, this field guarantees the Nordic nation at least another 5 decades of oil production.
Based on our own assessment, also looking or listening to the IEA, the International Energy Agency, there will be need for hydrocarbons also in 2050. There will be less need.
Across 4 platforms, hundreds of people work to control the drilling and pumping. In a control room, monitors watch the production carefully. All activities on the field are powered by an undersea cable from Norway, sourced from clean hydropower.
Every barrel produced from Johan Sverdrup is 25 times lower carbon footprint compared to the global average. And that's important in a climate perspective.
While Norway backs green initiatives like subsidising electric cars and protecting rainforests, the government is allocating record numbers of oil and gas exploration permits, meaning the days of the oil industry and Johan Sverdrup far from over.
Stock markets in Asia are trading mixed as the risk of a no-deal Brexit has ramped up. Investors are treading cautiously as UK's Prime Minister Boris Johnson explicitly ruled out any extension to the Brexit transition period beyond December 2020. Tokyo's Nikkei 225 is trading 0.5% lower as its auto sector retreated. Mitsubishi lost nearly 1%, followed by Honda, Toyota, Suzuki, which tumbled nearly 0.5% each. The Shanghai Composite is trading fractionally higher amid upbeat sentiments over the Phase 1 trade deal. Seoul's Kospi and Hong Kong's Hang Seng are trading fractionally lower. Meanwhile, international oil prices have edged 0.5% lower as the US crude oil inventory surges. This is all for now. For the latest updates, you can follow us on social media at indus.news.